I was a background character at Ashworth Academy, one of the countless faces in the crowd, until the night of the annual gala. Julian Croft, the brilliant scholarship student, a portrait of curated elegance, stumbled and collided with Caleb Thorne, the undisputed leader of Ashworth's ruling quartet, the Kings. As Julian looked up, his expression a practiced mix of defiance and vulnerability, I recited my line on cue, a thought bubbling up as if from an external script. It felt as though they were about to kiss, and I wondered aloud if Prince Caleb had also fallen under the scholarship student's spell. Then Caleb's head snapped around, his gaze locking onto mine with unnerving precision. A cruel smile twisted his lips as he strode toward me. He asked in a low voice if my excitement meant I wanted to try. Before I could process his words, his hand clamped onto the back of my neck, and he pressed his mouth against mine. This was not in the script. I had awakened. The world I inhabited was a novel, a piece of popular boy love fiction titled The Kings of Ashworth All Fall for Me. It chronicled the story of Julian Croft, the scholarship student, and his entanglements with the four wealthiest, most powerful students at the academy: Caleb Thorne, Sebastian Vale, Oliver Vance, and Jasper Knight. Julian, with his manufactured fearlessness, was the only one who dared to challenge their authority. His presence captivated them, and through daily friction and contrived drama, they were meant to be moved by his spirit, eventually falling for him in a cascade of competitive romantic turmoil. And I, Liam, was nothing more than set dressing, a prop program to deliver specific lines at specific moments, my entire existence designed to highlight the protagonist's brilliance. A slow breath escaped my lips. It all made a horrifying kind of sense. Since enrolling at Ashworth, my actions had often felt alien, particularly whenever Caleb and his friends were near. It was as if my own will was hijacked, replaced by the fervor of an obsessive fan. But I had my own life, my own ambitions. I wasn't supposed to orbit anyone. A notification chimed from my phone. It was the group chat for the Caleb Thorne official fan club, a server where I inexplicably was a moderator. With a groan, I tossed the phone aside and pulled the covers over my head. The information was overwhelming. I decided to sleep on it, vowing to abandon this nonsensical role. I needed to stay away from them. That night, I had a bizarre dream. In a vast, sterile white space that flickered like a corrupted video file, a small, glowing sprite-like entity appeared. It zipped toward me and bonked against my forehead. A synthesized, childlike voice complained that I wasn't supposed to deviate from my programming. I rubbed my head, feeling a dull throb that felt surprisingly real for a dream, and asked it what the hell it was. The sprite bristled, informing me it was not a hell, but a world moderator for the Kings of Ashworth narrative. It demanded to know how a non-player character like me had gained self-awareness. It insisted I had to follow the script. I scoffed, asking why I should. The sprite buzzed around me in agitation, squeaking that my non-compliance would cause system-wide chaos. I mirrored its petulance, stating I wanted to be myself. After a long silence, the sprite floated to eye level, its expression serious. It proposed a trade, offering the currency of my world in exchange for my cooperation. For every scripted action I completed, it would deposit a corresponding payment. I sneered, claiming I wasn't the type to be swayed by money. It offered $10,000 per action. My tone shifted immediately. We had a deal. The dream was so vivid that its details remained sharp in my mind upon waking. I resolved to test its veracity. Our family was comfortable, but not wealthy enough to make Ashworth's tuition feel like anything less than a significant burden. If the sprite's offer was genuine, I could alleviate my parents' financial stress. The powerful narrative force was undeniable. As I walked through the campus gates, the roar of engines grew louder. For brightly colored supercars, a crimson Ferrari, a midnight blue Lamborghini, an emerald Aston Martin, and a silver Porsche raced past. Just like me, other students, the background extras, instinctively formed two lines, their gasps and murmurs rising in a practiced chorus. I took a deep breath, my eyes widening in feigned adoration as I delivered my line perfectly. I exclaimed that Caleb had a new car and that the color was incredible. It was easy, almost muscle memory. Moments later, sitting in my first class, a notification lit up my phone. A direct deposit of $10,000. It was real and it was instant. A surge of motivation coursed through me. I glanced at my phone's lock screen, a professionally shot photo of Caleb, and wondered if the sprite could hear my thoughts. I mentally projected that I hadn't even changed my wallpaper, which ought to count for something. If the Kings were a boy band, Caleb had been my bias, my phone's gallery a shrine to his photogenic features. While I could still appreciate his handsomeness, the obsessive fog had lifted. As if in response, another $10,000 deposit notification appeared. I chuckled. The little sprite was all right. From then on, I became the model NPC. One afternoon, heading to the dining hall, I passed the campus botanical garden and saw the four of them in a gazebo, deep in conversation. I expertly pulled out my phone, framed a few artful shots of the group, and then a few striking solo pictures of Caleb. The group photos went to the Kings of Ashworth general server, with a caption about how the four of them seemed to be in good spirits. The solo shots went to the fan club, captioned with a note about Caleb's flawless appearance from every angle. The replies began pouring in instantly. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps grew closer. I looked up to see Caleb Thorne standing 2 feet away. He was taller than I remembered, forcing me to crane my neck. His face, a study in sharp, aristocratic beauty, was impassive. His eyes, deep and unreadable, were fixed on me. His sheer presence was so overwhelming that I felt an involuntary tremor run through me. My apology was a reflexive stammer as I bowed my head, my eyes glued to the pavement while I silently pleaded for a quick escape. His voice, a low, resonant baritone, asked what I had done wrong. I mumbled that I shouldn't have taken their pictures without permission. He held out a hand, and I meekly passed him my phone. As he swiped through the gallery, I peeked up, watching his expression. A flicker of surprise crossed his features. He glanced at me and remarked that the pictures were actually quite good. A small smile tugged at my lips. Of course they were. I had honed my skills over years, becoming the unofficial photographer for the Kings. He handed the phone back without deleting anything, simply advising me not to do it again. I nodded eagerly. As I pocketed my phone, preparing to leave, a clear voice cut through the air, asking what he was doing. It was Julian Croft. He strode forward, positioning himself between me and Caleb, his face a mask of indignation. He looked up at Caleb without a trace of fear and demanded to know if being rich gave him the right to bully people. Then he turned to me, his expression softening into one of misplaced reassurance, telling me not to be afraid. He said he wouldn't let them hurt me. I was bewildered. Was I being bullied? Before I could respond, he turned back to Caleb and demanded an apology. Caleb's gaze remained on me, ignoring Julian completely. One of his eyebrows arched slightly as he asked if he had, in fact, bullied me. My NPC programming kicked in. I slipped out from behind Julian and scurried over to Caleb's side. With a defiant tilt of my chin, I declared that Prince Caleb hadn't bullied me at all, and accused the bizarre scholarship student of making things up. Julian stared at me, his shock quickly curdling into a look of profound disappointment, as if I had committed some grave betrayal. He sputtered, his hands clenching into fists, and told Caleb that it seemed he was meddling. He spun around and stormed off, pausing only to tell the other three, who were watching from the gazebo with amused expressions, that he would never bow to their tyranny. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of confusion. Caleb hadn't been bullying me. Why did Julian react as if I had stabbed him in the back? When I looked back, Caleb was studying me with a thoughtful expression. His constant scrutiny was starting to feel strange. I joked internally that he must have finally noticed my exceptional good looks and felt threatened. Not wanting to just walk away, I offered him a small smile and a goodbye before leaving the garden. I immediately posted in the fan club server about being caught by Caleb and announced my retirement from photography, citing his direct order. Amid a flood of protests, I stood firm, declaring my unwavering loyalty to Prince Caleb's wishes. It was a perfect excuse. I was tired of the hassle anyway. With my recent earnings, I decided to treat myself. Ashworth's dining options were tiered, and instead of my usual spot in the main commons, I headed for the Pinnacle, the rooftop restaurant where a single meal could cost $1,000. The decor was stunning, with a panoramic glass ceiling and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the campus. It was off-peak, so the restaurant was quiet. A holographic menu scrolled across a glass panel. I dithered between the $900 wild mushroom pappardelle and the $1,000 truffle and foie gras toast. A languid voice from behind me asked which line I was in. I muttered an apology and shuffled aside. Turning, I saw it was Caleb. For a moment, my mind went blank. Then my NPC duty reasserted itself. I gasped, exclaiming his name. Caleb's expression was flat, tinged with a barely perceptible weariness. He commented on my delayed reaction and added that his father wasn't a king, so he didn't know who had crowned him a prince. I mumbled that everyone called him that. He let out a short, humorless laugh and asked if I was ever going to order. Worried I was holding him up, I hastily selected the pasta. As I was about to pay, a hand with long, elegant fingers reached past me and tapped a card against the reader. Caleb paid for my meal. I looked at him, confused. He said it was a thank you for the good photos. As I ate the overpriced and underwhelming pasta, I found myself thinking that Caleb Thorne was surprisingly down to earth. My life continued. I still ran into the Kings, who seemed to drift around campus as if classes were a mere suggestion, trailing chaos in their wake. I remained a dedicated NPC, only occasionally skipping a performance when buried under coursework. One day in the library, I wandered into a secluded alcove and overheard raised voices. It was Julian, his tone laced with fury, asking Jasper if tormenting an ordinary person was really so amusing. Jasper's mocking laugh followed. He asked Julian what he thought he would accomplish by repeatedly testing his patience, then told him to bear the consequences. The voices grew closer, and it was too late to leave. Jasper rounded the corner and saw me. He seemed to recognize me as one of the ever-present background characters. His expression remained placid as he instructed me to pass it on that Julian Croft had earned a black mark. I felt like some kind of court eunuch relaying a royal decree. Before I could say anything, Jasper swept past me. Julian followed close behind. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes blazing with anger. He sneered, calling me a lackey for those 4 devils, and spat that there was nothing good about scumbags like them. He warned me to be careful not to get burned, then stormed off. Holding a heavy textbook, I felt utterly drained. They curse each other now, but they'll be passionately entangled later. It seemed I was just a pawn in their elaborate mating ritual. Before I even had a chance to speak to anyone, News of Julian's black mark had spread across campus. It wasn't an official school rule but part of a shadow system of control maintained by the student council, which was, of course, run by the kings. A black mark was a social stain that led to public shunning and restricted access to resources. I didn't know what Julian had done to provoke Jasper, but I remembered from the novel that his first black mark was supposed to have been issued by Caleb. The script was changing. I didn't dwell on it. Soon, the academy was abuzz with preparations for a grand gala hosted by the kings. As a moderator of Caleb's fan club, I had an invitation. This was clearly a major plot point, and I conservatively estimated I could earn $1 million from it. I attended with genuine enthusiasm, even buying a new, impeccably tailored suit. The ballroom was alive with music and chatter. I grabbed a miniature cake and gossiped with classmates, easily completing several tasks by keeping the conversation centered on the kings. Not long after, the four of them made their grand entrance, each embodying a different archetype of handsome. Caleb, cool and intense. Sebastian, refined and graceful. Oliver, warm and gentle. Jasper, roguishly charming. The atmosphere reached a fever pitch. I joined in the chorus of admiration. Then the four dispersed to mingle. I was wandering through the crowd when I heard a commotion. It was Julian and Caleb. I squeezed my way to the front line. Julian had apparently bumped into Caleb, spilling a glass of red wine down the front of Caleb's pristine white shirt. Caleb had grabbed Julian's arm, his expression darkening with annoyance. Julian, biting his lip, stared up at him defiantly, insisting that Caleb had suddenly moved into his path. Caleb's brow furrowed as he leaned in closer, but then he stopped, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I was so engrossed that I almost forgot my line. I exclaimed that they were about to kiss and wondered aloud if Prince Caleb was also captivated by the scholarship student. The moment the words left my mouth, Caleb's head whipped around, his gaze homing in on me. He strode over, a predatory grin on his face. He asked if my excitement meant I wanted to try. Before I could react, he leaned down, his hand cupping the back of my head, and kissed me. A warm, firm pressure on my lips that lasted only a few seconds, but felt like it had siphoned the soul from my body. The collective gasp of the students around us was the only thing that convinced me I wasn't dreaming. What was happening? Why wasn't he following the script? I stood there, stunned and speechless. Caleb pulled back and asked for my name. A cold dread washed over me. Had I angered him? I started to stammer that I hadn't shouted, that I was just talking normally. He paused, then clarified, asking again for my name. I told him it was Liam. He repeated it softly, then said he needed to discuss something with me and that I should follow him. My heart hammered against my ribs as I followed him to a spacious, luxurious private lounge. Was this in the novel? A scene where Caleb Thorne forcibly kisses an NPC and then pulls him into a private room? No, this was uncharted territory. As Caleb approached, I reflexively covered my mouth. A barely perceptible smile touched his lips as he offered an insincere apology for his impulsive behavior. I muttered that it was some impulse to just kiss a random person, adding that it had been my first kiss. He raised an eyebrow and asked if I wasn't happy about it, reminding me that I was supposed to like him. I was speechless. He leaned in, his eyes level with mine, and said my name again, telling me I was different. Different how? Exceptionally handsome? I didn't ask. I just asked what he meant. He smiled, a genuine, small smile this time, but didn't explain. Instead, his next words were like a lightning strike. He told me to be with him from now on, asking me to be his boyfriend. My eyes widened. I managed to ask if he was drunk. Caleb was serious. And then came the second bolt of lightning. He said our world was just a book. I stared at him, my mind reeling. He knew too. The two didn't escape him. He let out a soft chuckle, confirming his suspicion that I was also aware. Inside my head, the little sprite was screaming in panic, yelling that there was a critical error and it had to report to the main server before vanishing completely. Wait, did that mean the $10,000 deal was off? Caleb confessed that while he knew he was a character, a powerful force had always compelled him to follow the script. Until, he explained, he discovered that being near me weakened that force. That was why I was different. He said if I agreed to be his boyfriend, he would grant any reasonable request I made. He added that he couldn't stand dealing with self-important idiots, a clear jab at Julian. I was torn. I slowly asked if he would give me a black mark if I refused. He said he didn't engage in such childish games, but a smirk played on his lips as he added that if I said no, he would just ask again. After a long, silent negotiation, I agreed. When he asked what I wanted in return, I couldn't think of anything. So he declared that I could decide later, and in the meantime, he would give me $1 million a month. I feebly protested that it was too much, while internally, my heart did a victory lap. The next day, I moved into Caleb's private residence on campus, a 3-story standalone villa. To avoid being torn apart by his fans, I kept our new arrangement a secret. When people asked about the incident at the gala, I told them I'd said the wrong thing and Caleb had bitten my mouth to teach me a lesson. I wasn't sure if they bought it, but I did. The bed in his villa was so impossibly soft that I slept through my alarm. A knock on the door woke me. I shuffled to open it, still in my pajamas, and found Caleb standing there. His expression faltered for a second when he saw me. He asked if I was still in bed. I covered a small yawn and explained that I didn't have morning classes. Our majors were different. He asked if I intended to starve, then told me to get dressed and come downstairs for breakfast. It was a lavish spread. Starting the day with such a delicious meal instantly lifted my spirits. As Caleb prepared to leave for his own classes, I waved lazily from the sofa. Perhaps seeing me so relaxed while he had to go to class annoyed him. He walked over, gently pinched my cheek, and asked if I had any sense of a boyfriend's duties. I blinked, thought for a moment, and tried again. I called him honey and said goodbye. Caleb's hand flinched. He released my face, his words coming out in a rush as he said he'd see me later, then practically fled the room. I stretched my neck to watch him go and thought I saw the tips of his ears glowing crimson. The sprite was truly gone. The silence was strange at first, but also liberating. I had a decent nest egg now, and with Caleb's monthly allowance, I was more than set. As for our relationship, I wasn't exactly straight, and Caleb wasn't the cold, unpredictable tyrant from the novel. He was decent to me. Dating someone that good-looking wasn't a bad deal. Part of our agreement was to spend a lot of time together. Caleb said the narrative force was insidious and relentless. I thought he was exaggerating, but Julian's appearances were becoming increasingly absurd. When we were at a cafe, Julian would suddenly trip and fall in our direction. When we were watching swans by the lake, Julian would appear and scold us for getting too close and scaring them. At the gym, Julian would be on the adjacent badminton court, struggling loudly with the basics. Caleb's strategy was simply to ignore him completely. One afternoon, Caleb accompanied me to the library. I had a term paper due and was drowning in research. I slumped over the desk, exhausted. A moment later, Caleb returned with 2 books. I decided to use his own logic against him, asking him if he had any sense of a boyfriend's duties. He paused, then walked over, gently stroking my hair before sitting down and pulling my head onto his shoulder in a slightly awkward gesture of comfort. He told me not to rush, to take my time. That wasn't what I meant. My cheeks flushed. Even though we were in a private study room, it felt embarrassing. I nudged his neck with my head, sat up, and asked if he could just write it for me. He flatly refused, but pointed out that the 2 books he'd found were directly related to my topic. I accepted them happily. With his help, my work progressed much faster. Before long, we were sharing a room. Caleb claimed he was having strange dreams where the narrative kept trying to force Julian on him, and he thought my presence might help. I was skeptical but agreed. The next morning, he declared that it had worked perfectly. At his insistence, I moved into the master bedroom with him. Though our relationship began for pragmatic reasons, we fell into the rhythms of a real couple. Slowly, people on campus began to notice. One day, someone tagged me in the old fan club server, asking why I was always with Prince Caleb and if we were close. Others chimed in, remarking that they had seen us at the library together. A knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. It felt like a fan getting caught having a private line to their idol. As I agonized over how to reply, Caleb wrapped his arms around me from behind. He asked why I was ignoring him. I told him I hadn't heard him. His grip tightened, pulling me firmly against his chest, his tone tinged with a playful pique. He pointed out that I was lying in my boyfriend's bed and was still more engrossed in a chat with other people. I simply angled the phone so he could see the screen and asked him how I was supposed to explain this. He looked at it for a few seconds, then took the phone, held down the voice memo button, and said clearly, "We're a couple. Any objections?" I snatched the phone back, horrified, and hissed at him for being so reckless. He seemed unfazed, asking why I was even still in that bizarre group, attributing my past NPC behavior to a penchant for drama. I suppose he had a point. I quickly left the server before anyone could start attacking me, tossed the phone aside, and turned to face him. He was so nonchalant, announcing our relationship so easily even though his feelings weren't real. As I was thinking, he reached out and pinched my cheek, asking if I was angry. I looked up and saw a flicker of disappointment on his face. He asked if I was that reluctant to let people know about us. "It wasn't that," I said, trying to explain that it was because he was Prince Caleb, loved by so many. He fell silent for a moment, then said quietly that if I called him that again, he'd turn me into Princess Liam. I gasped and instinctively covered myself, declaring that he wouldn't dare. He was a boy. Then Caleb laughed. He cupped my face and kissed me. A deep, searing kiss that was different from before. It was fierce and possessive, and it lasted a long time. When he finally pulled away, it took me a moment to catch my breath. It had been nice. I leaned in and brushed my lips against his again. That was all the invitation he needed. He pulled me into his arms and kissed me until we were both breathless. One evening, we went to the Commons for dinner. Caleb rarely ate there, but they had a spicy noodle bowl that I adored. As we walked in, I could feel dozens of eyes on us, most likely staring at Caleb. But the stares felt different now, less like adoring fans and more like simple curiosity. When my noodles arrived, I saw they had been garnished with cilantro, which I hated. I'd forgotten to ask them to leave it out. As I meticulously picked out the green flecks, Caleb reached over with his chopsticks and started helping. He put the cilantro he picked out into his own bowl. He told me to try it, and I did. He ate a bite from his own bowl and, under my expectant gaze, nodded that it was good. I smiled and went back to my noodles. Halfway through, I noticed he hadn't finished the meatballs in his bowl. I only glanced at them for a second, but he naturally transferred them to my bowl. I grinned, admitting I was getting a little tired of them after eating 3 already, then popped one into my mouth. Caleb watched me with a gentle, amused look in his eyes. Then I saw him. Julian was standing not far away, a tray in his hands, watching us. His expression was blank, but his eyes held a chilling coldness. I pushed down the strange feeling and looked away. Later, when we found ourselves in a secluded corner of campus, the feeling returned. We were kissing, thinking the quiet spot afforded us some privacy. Just as Caleb's lips met mine, I caught a glimpse of a figure behind some distant bushes. But then Caleb's body blocked my view. When the dizzying kiss ended, I looked again, but the figure was gone. Caleb, his head resting on mine, asked what I was looking at. I told him it was nothing. That afternoon, Caleb had a class. As I was walking to the library alone, an unexpected person blocked my path. It was Julian. He said we needed to talk. We had nothing to talk about, but the thunderous look on his face made me agree. By the shimmering lake, he didn't waste any time. He asked if stealing things that belonged to others gave me a sense of accomplishment, calling me a pathetic thief. I was stunned but retorted, asking if slandering people gave him a sense of purpose. He took a step closer, a sneer twisting his lips. He said the whole world revolved around him, and that I, a nobody NPC, should just do what I was told instead of using despicable methods to seduce his man. The venom in his eyes was palpable. The pieces clicked into place in my head. If Caleb and I were both awake, maybe Julian was too. But would awakening warp someone's personality so drastically? This was not the pure, innocent Julian from the novel. I looked at him with newfound clarity, a look of mock realization on my face. I said that me being with Caleb had really gotten to him. His face contorted in fury. I clicked my tongue, adding that Caleb had said he didn't like self-important idiots. Julian looked like he might explode. He hissed that we would see, that he was waiting to watch me cry when Caleb dumped me. Then he stalked off. I went back and gave Caleb a full, dramatic reenactment of the encounter, complete with a villainous voice for Julian and a trembling, innocent one for myself. Caleb listened with a frown, his only comment being that the guy was a moron. He pulled me into his arms and asked if I had insulted him back. I puffed out my chest and said I had, that I'd left him speechless with rage. Caleb praised me, then told me to call him immediately if Julian ever approached me alone again. I wanted to discuss the possibility that Julian was also self-aware, but Caleb was clearly uninterested in him. His hand slipped inside my sweatpants, his voice dropping to a low murmur as he suggested we do something more productive. I felt the heat of his body against my back and tried to squirm away, but he held me fast, nibbling my earlobe as he whispered a promise that it would be quick. I didn't believe him for a second. Julian, true to his threat, began spreading rumors. He told members of the fan club that I had used underhanded tactics to seduce Caleb, that I had betrayed their trust. He was trying to isolate me. It came to a head one day in the dining hall when the former president of the fan club, flanked by a group of familiar faces, marched up to my table. Julian stood with them, a picture of innocence. The president slammed his hand on the table and accused me of playing them all for fools. I asked him what he meant. He said we were all supposed to be admiring Prince Caleb from afar, but I had gone and gotten together with him. He asked if it was true, like Julian claimed, that I had used illicit means. I asked for an example. He hesitated, glancing at Julian, then said that I had tracked Caleb's schedule and engineered coincidental meetings to get his attention. I answered honestly that I hadn't, that Caleb had pursued me. I told him to ask Caleb himself when he arrived. Everyone froze. I looked at Julian, who was glaring at me, and adopted a wounded expression. I reminded the president that we'd known each other for a long time and asked him if he really thought I was that kind of person. I suggested that the one trying to get their attention was standing right next to him. I argued that Caleb and I were in a consensual relationship and that there were no school rules against it. The president's expression softened, but he still hesitated, muttering that Prince Caleb belonged to everyone. A familiar voice cut in from behind him, asking since when. Everyone flinched. Caleb had arrived. He walked over and sat down beside me as I scooted over. He surveyed the tense scene and asked nonchalantly what business they had with his boyfriend. The president was tongue-tied. I nudged Caleb and reminded him they had questions. Caleb nodded for them to ask. The president stammered, asking if he was with me voluntarily. Caleb shot back, asking if he looked like he was being forced. Silence. Caleb told them to go back to their own business, adding that I hadn't finished my meal. The president took a deep breath and said they respected his decision. Caleb added one last thing. He told them to stop obsessing over him like he was a celebrity and to stay away from the person next to them. He said he had brain damage. He meant Julian. The looks on everyone's faces, especially Julian's, were priceless. Period of peace followed. Final exams were approaching. One afternoon, while studying, I rested my head on the table and watched Caleb type on his laptop. He noticed my gaze and asked if I was hungry. I wasn't. He asked if I wanted something to drink. I requested coffee. While we waited for the delivery from the library's in-house cafe, we chatted. I asked him what his friends thought of Julian. Caleb said he'd warned them, and they now found Julian more annoying than interesting, his attempts at manipulation too obvious and clumsy. That night, the sprite returned in my dream. It was frantic, explaining that the system had identified the problem. Julian's consciousness had been hijacked by an outside conqueror, which was causing all the bugs. More and more people were waking up. When I asked what would happen, it said the main server had given up, told us all to live how we wanted, wished me luck, and disappeared. Caleb had the same dream. It was really over. The semester ended. My family and Caleb's both lived in the city, but he insisted on staying together, claiming he'd grown so used to sleeping with me that he couldn't sleep alone. My parents were away on a business trip for a few months, so I agreed to move in with him. One night, I was scrolling through travel videos on my phone, with Caleb watching over my shoulder. An image of a snow-capped mountain range caught my eye. I said I wanted to go there. Caleb, playing with my earlobe, asked where. I said a snow mountain. He said we could book flights right now. I got excited and started looking up destinations, but fell asleep before I could decide. The next evening, Caleb had a formal dinner to attend. I met up with some old friends. Around 9, he called me. His voice was a low, ragged rasp when he said my name. It was the same tone he used when we were intimate, a mix of restraint, desire, and vulnerability. I sat up straight, asking what was wrong and where he was. He told me his drink had been spiked. He let out a shaky breath and said he really needed to see me. A jolt of panic went through me. I shot up, demanding his location. He gave me the hotel name. I told my friends I had to leave and promised him I'd be there in 10 minutes. I asked if anyone was with him, if he needed me to call an ambulance. He said no, he just needed me. He wouldn't let me hang up, and as I raced to the hotel, he started murmuring delirious, intimate things into the phone, about how much he wanted me, how soft my skin was, how sweet I tasted. My face burned. When I finally reached his room, he wasn't in the main suite. I heard water running from the bathroom. I pushed the door open and found him sitting in the tub, fully clothed and soaking wet, cold water raining down on him. His shirt was unbuttoned, clinging to the hard planes of his chest. He looked up, his eyes hazy with fever and need. He staggered to his feet and pulled me into a desperate, bruising kiss. His hands roamed, his mouth followed, his voice hoarse as he asked if it was okay. I hugged him back and told him yes, to hurry. He swept me into his arms and carried me to the bed. The person who drugged him was Julian. The dose was dangerously high. Caleb's family dealt with him swiftly and quietly, ensuring he wouldn't be a problem for anyone ever again. With Julian gone, the last vestiges of the novel's plot dissolved. We were free. One night, Caleb told me we needed to talk, that there was something important we had to clear up. My mind raced. Was he going to break up with me? The original reason for our relationship, to fight the script, was gone. But it didn't feel right. We had been inseparable, our bond deepening every day. If he tried to end things, I wouldn't let him. I went to meet him, my heart a tangle of nerves and defiance. He had booked the entire rooftop restaurant. Below us, the city was a river of stars. The view was magnificent, and we were the only two people there to see it. A familiar voice spoke beside me. He told me he owed me a proper confession. I turned to look at him. Caleb's expression was impossibly gentle, his eyes reflecting the city lights. He said my name, then told me that he loved me and asked me for real this time if I would be with him. At that exact moment, fireworks erupted outside the window, painting the night sky in bursts of brilliant color, illuminating his handsome face in fleeting flashes of light. We had been together for months, but my heart fluttered as if for the first time. I smiled and said yes, then launched myself into his arms. We held each other as if trying to merge into one being. The fireworks faded, leaving only the quiet, deep night and the soft moonlight washing over us. Everything was exactly as it should be.